All right. Sorry for the delayed start. We had a lengthy agenda item beforehand, a little past schedule. So we'll bring this meeting to order for Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee. This is a public hearing matter under the Planning Act. Again, this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act if a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered. The person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board. And the item is to consider draft plan of subdivision and zone change application for Lackner Keewatin for the Grand River North. Mr. Bateman, if you want to bring forward the item and with your presentation. Just bear with me. Just go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair, committee members, fellow staff, and residents of Kitchener. My name is Brian Bateman. I'm senior planner in charge of this file tonight, and I'm here to speak to the recommendations before the committee for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment and modification to an approved draft plan of subdivision, file number 30T 91005. So if you can kind of look at the screen. In 1995, the Sanders Springs draft plan of subdivision was approved as shown. It's located in the Grand River North neighborhood and is bounded by Lackner Boulevard, Forwell Road, Keewatin Avenue, and is located just south of Victoria Street. The subdivision, as shown in the picture, is approximately 18 hectares in area. It's a residential subdivision consisting of 179 single detached lots plus 8 future lots, a neighborhood park, a stormwater management pond, all around a centrally located private amenity pond, and that's that very, I guess, large blue area of the plan. I provided some color. I thought it'd be a little easier to discern these different land uses here. And with the private amenity pond, it was to be owned and maintained by the surrounding lot owners. In approximately 2004, the subject lands were sold to Mr. William J. Geese Construction Limited with the intent of moving forward with the plan as you see it now. However, a question arose regarding Block 133, which is the private amenity pond, that blue area right in the middle of the plan, as the pond presented a significant liability challenge. So as such, the developers set out to explore options of removing the pond feature in order to eliminate the use of the liability. In 2006, the former Y&Y lands, and I'm just going to skip ahead to the next drawing here very quickly, and the Y&Y lands are that long, narrow strip of land. It's outlined in gray, right abutting Lackner Boulevard. These were also purchased by Mr. Geese, and these lands are approximately 4 hectares in area and were subject to a separate plan of subdivision at the time, but it was put on hold and was never approved, and the zoning on that particular parcel of land remains A1, or agricultural. And really the intent was for the Y&Y lands to be a sort of a logical extension to the Sanders Springs plan. So just flip over to the next slide. So in late 2007, an application was submitted requesting bylaw amendment changes to 2 areas, and these areas are outlined in gray. So the first area is the Block 133, which was the private amenity pond, and the second area was the former Y&Y lands, also shown, which are located adjacent to Lackner Boulevard. And the rezoning request was for changing it from open space to residential for the private amenity pond and from agricultural to residential for the Y&Y lands. And at the same time, a request was made to modify the existing draft approval accordingly. And the modification to the plan would consist of making changes to the plan and to the conditions as approval as a result of the zone change. So here is the proposed modified draft plan under consideration tonight. Highlights are, well, the plan is obviously larger because we've added in the Y and Y land, so it's gone from 18 hectares to 22 hectares in area. And the new plan is proposing a total of 326 units, and it's comprised of single, semi-detached, street-fronting townhouse, and multiple dwelling units. It also includes a new centrally located park location. That's the area in green in the middle of the plan, with both active and passive space, with pedestrian access through the open space corridors that link up with the existing trail network. It provides for a full range of housing types in this plan. Instead of being an exclusively single detached lotting plan, we've introduced, like I said, multiples, which consist of probably townhouses and stacked townhouses. There's street townhouses and semis. It includes a small commercial block of land, and that's the area outlined in red, at the very, very corner of Keewatin and Lackner Boulevard. Neighborhood scale and size. It would serve sort of the day-to-day commercial needs of the surrounding community, and we've identified a particular need for a small commercial site at that area. So map 1 and the proposed zoning bylaw attached to my report implements these proposed changes. I won't get into great detail on that. Staff has canvassed the community for comments, I think, quite considerably. There's been 2 letter circulations and a neighborhood information meeting. We've received a lot of comments. There's been a lot of interest in this particular proposal. Staff has held a lot of meetings with residents that have expressed a particular interest in this plan, and staff has engaged. We've listened, and we've acted upon many of the concerns and comments received through revisions, either through revisions made to the plan, such as reducing the size of the commercial area, to new zoning areas, such as the split zoning proposed for Knollwood Court. We've introduced new conditions of approval, or we've responded to particular concerns either through email, letter responses, and then, of course, lastly, the staff report. So highlights and conclusions. So in conclusion, it's staff's opinion that the proposal to modify the plan and the implementing zoning is good planning for the following reasons. And if I can maybe just draw your attention to the slide. I know there's a lot on there, but I'll just rehash it very quickly. I mean, the proposed changes, they conform to the city's official plan, a provincial plan, and a regional plan. It's gone through a satisfactory technical review, and we've incorporated all the measures through modified conditions of approval. We've engaged and listened to residents' comments, resulting in a fair, balanced, and positive approach to the plan. It's approaching complete community status in my mind, which is a place where people can live, work, and play. We've introduced a variety of housing that's very consistent in our low-rise designation. It provides for a transition of housing types, and the larger single detached lot sizes have been retained to promote compatibility with the existing residential areas. We've got the commercial block has been added. There's a new park location. It's centrally located and it's highly visible within the community. We've got improved pedestrian and trail connectivity. We've got improved traffic flow and traffic calming with the roundabout. We've got the Outer Bean Road connection to Lackner Boulevard. That's being done up front, the first stage, to help split and divert traffic. We've got greater protection of trees located on Knollwood Court, and that's achieved through the split zoning that I spoke to previously. And then, of course, lastly is that I believe that the removal of the pond eliminates the burden of liability that would be placed on future lot purchasers if that were to remain. Thank you very much, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Next in line is delegation is Mr. Head. Do you want to make delegation or just be supportive of staff's recommendation?
Am I on?
You should be.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for allowing us to present this modification to the draft plan of subdivision tonight. My name is Andrew Head. I'm from Dryden, Smith & Head Planning Consultants in Kitchener. I'm here on behalf of Mr. WMJ Geese Construction Limited. I'd like to take this time to thank staff, in particular Mr. Bateman. He's done a great job with his presentation and covered the main issues of this application. We fully support his recommendation for approval and the conditions outlined in his report. We would like you to take particular note that under this modification, we upheld the integrity of the original plan. We did not modify this plan in an effort to maximize the density of the site, but to remove the amenity pond, a liability that would sterilize land and create an unwanted hazard to the community. If built in the 1995 standards, the requirements would make the amenity pond a large landlocked fenced parcel that is difficult to maintain and access. Staff noted concerns about liability and ownership of the amenity pond and noted that somehow this land one day could end up under the city ownership, again becoming the city's liability and continuing maintenance issues. Through their public meeting process, we heard from many of the area residents. Modifications were made to the plan to reduce the commercial block, and additional tree savings have been implemented, including but not limited to a split zoning for Knollwood Court to further ensure greater tree protection. With the addition of the Y&Y lands, this plan of subdivision is exactly what urban design developments are desired to be. Working with the city, we developed a plan that addresses a much-needed neighborhood commercial block and includes a mix of residential dwellings, unit types, and sizes. With the relocation of the park to a central area, it now allows for greater walkability throughout the subdivision. This modification is exactly what is mandated from the Planning Act, Places to Grow, and provincial policies. This plan now adheres to and is a prime example of how the planning process wants development designated and designed. Not only does it adhere to the regional official plan and the city official plan, but it reflects exactly what is in the legislative documents want in planning neighborhoods. The site now addresses the need for a small commercial block for the neighborhood. This plan contains all types and styles of homes, from affordable housing to large lot development. With the relocation of the park, we created the walkability with access to park blocks and throughout the core of this development. We support staff's recommendation for approval of the modification to the draft plan of subdivision and the zone change application. We would be happy to answer any questions provided or provide further information. With me tonight is Mr. Stephen Rhoda from MTE, as our engineer, if you have any questions for him as well. Thank you, and we request that you support the approval of this modification to the draft plan of subdivision for the Sanders Springs development.
Thank you, Mr. Head. There are questions of you from the committee. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, I think you probably can answer this question. If not, staff can. I'm just looking at block 2. Sorry, I'm on page 1-64. I don't know if you have the same as we do, but it's basically your plan of subdivision.
Yep, I have copy.
And I'm looking in phase 2, lots 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which, if I read correctly, say that they're single detached homes.
Sorry, just what phase was that again?
So phase 2.
Yep.
And then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Stage 2.
It's really small near the bottom, just above the YY lands. Right above the commercial use.
Okay, yes, I see it. Yes, those are semi-detaches.
Those are semi-detaches.
Yes.
Okay, because it looks as though it's labeled as single detached, but I could have read that wrong. That makes sense. And then it's a good plan, in my opinion. But how do you plan to develop on phase 3, lots 9 and 10? Those are very irregular shaped lots, and
They are irregular shape, but we looked at the setbacks and the building envelopes, and they're quite large lots. The problem, what you're looking at, you get taken by these large lots,
yeah.
And the eye doesn't suit this anymore because even though everything around there, they're 14-meter wide lots, 13.7-meter wide lots, so therefore we can still accommodate double-car garages on these lots with a large house. It's just not going to be a normal-looking lot.
Okay.
So you'll have a lot of side yard for once instead of backyard. Great place, to accommodate a swimming pool.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yes, thanks. So you said that you don't, that you haven't changed the subdivision plan very much, but I would say that you have. You've added an additional street. You've got Quarry Park Drive now, where you didn't have that on the original plan. You only had Quarry Park Place. I guess my first question should be then, how many additional units? What you're saying on the plan on 1-64 is 326 total units. And how many were originally planned for that development?
Certainly. The original plan covered 170 single-detached dwelling units. That is as approved 1995. We currently increased the size to 100. It's currently 226 units. 181 will be single-family detached from the 170. 20%. Sorry, that's 80% of the site. 20 units will become semi-detached, which is 8.9%, and 25% will become townhomes at 11.1%. Then, on the additional lands, there will be the increase of an additional 47 units, potentially.
So then I guess I'm puzzled as to how you can say you didn't change the subdivision plan dramatically, because you did. You almost doubled it.
I said that we didn't change the integrity of the heart of the plan, ideally being a single-family development that had larger lots, much bucking the system of what is being developed out there today. If we changed the integrity from the larger lot development, there would have been a lot more lots in this plan to cater to what is selling elsewhere in this city of ours.
Okay. So I'm sure anybody who's been reading the newspaper or watching the news has been hearing about the woodlot and the concern about the woodlot. Is it possible for you to show me, I tried to drive the area and I just didn't seem to be able to connect the dots on it, where it is that that we're finding this concern? I know it's off of Knollwood. Okay.
It is actually in phase 5.
Yep.
So if you see on your screen there, you'll see phase 5. It's Knollwood Court. There is 13 lots that are on that court. That is where the tree retention is going to be happening, where the tree savings implemented by lot. We're going to part of the policy that we've agreed to and the conditions is each lot will undergo a tree savings.
Okay. So this Knollwood is not there yet, or is it?
No, currently it's a road stub.
Okay.
It is not developed.
And where does it end right now then? Just at the dotted line?
At Dunnigan Drive is where it ends.
Okay.
There's currently one lot fronting onto Knollwood Court.
Okay. Do we have a sense of the number of trees that will be removed for these lots?
No, we didn't count the trees. There's several trees in there. It is an approved plan. We have done everything that we possibly can do to save as many trees as we can.
I understand.
That's why
that.
we're integrating
I understand
this.
that. I know. Well, I don't have any time right now. I don't know if whether I didn't get started or am I finished?
No, you're right. I'm
It's
still
okay.
getting used to the time clock.
What is let's do it this way. You certainly wouldn't be able to count the trees. One, what's the maturity of the trees? Is it an old growth forest? Is it a second growth forest? And two, what is the acreage of the trees that are to be removed?
I don't know the age of the trees. I'm not a tree person. When it was approved, it was 1995, and there was a forest there at the time. There's still trees there. We have currently from the approved plan. What I can tell you is in the approved plan there was 2.75 acres of Knollwood would have been graded at that point, and we've reduced that area to 1.7 acres. A savings of 1.0 acres, 0.5 acres. So we've clawed that back from the original approved plan. We've managed to claw it back and look into the development side and taken back one additional acre from that area.
Okay, so you've reduced it and you're keeping 1 acre treed.
Well, no, I don't know what that area is. I'm saying the original area that would have been part of the grading limit. We've modified that grading limit and we've reduced it by 1 acre. So essentially we've saved 1 acre of area of what the trees would be. And then each lot will then undergo tree savings on it. So we're going to initially be putting these trees into the houses between the trees as best as we can within, you have to be realistic here.
Okay, and I understand how that can be done. The problem is often the die-off rate of trees.
Well, actually,
is
we've installed an enhancement area at that buffer and grading limit. So the buffer where the cut is going to be happening, we've increased a 5-meter enhancement area, and tree planting is going to be. So we're going to take that limit, and we're going to do as much as we can with that limit to offset any die-off that's going to happen at that point in time.
Are you using drip line as part of that formula?
I believe so. That would be what my guess would be.
Okay, sometimes guests may not be so good. So we've heard, that's been a concern publicly that
Yes.
we've heard. The pond that we're talking about, are you aware of an area within the city that has a private pond?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so Grand Hill Drive has a private pond in that area, has maintained it as their private pond for decades and decades. So you're saying that that became a liability to the developer. If you're not familiar with the fact that there is one already existing within the community, why wouldn't you have used that as your example?
Well, when you put the picture up on the board and it shows you the big blue spot, that's not the reality of what it's going to be like. Due to the slopes that are going to be there and the grades, what you're going to be left with is not a beautiful pond with ducks floating in it. It's going to be a fenced, graded area with slopes that are 3 or 5 to 1 that are going into the bottom of this hole. And essentially, if there was to be one accident, who's going to take ownership of that pond? Would it be the surrounding neighborhoods? I don't know who would want to have ownership of the liability.
But that's no different than the stormwater management ponds we have all through the city that are not fenced off that a child could fall into.
Councillor Fernandez here, 5 minutes.
Okay, my final. So
Feed you in
if I have any more
afterwards.
questions, I'll come back.
Thank you.
And I think the delegation did try to help answer some of those questions, but you can key back in. Staff had keyed in. Mr. Bateman, did you have anything to add to those questions? Or?
Well, I was going to add with respect to Knollwood Court, Councillor Fernandez, is we have a tree management policy at the city, as you are aware. So there's an approved plan in place. So their obligation is to prepare a tree management plan. And what they've done is they've prepared this tree retention analysis recommendations plan, which basically outlines the areas of Knollwood Court. Again, keeping in mind this is an approved cul-de-sac and lotting fabric has been approved. This plan is to show where development can occur and where tree savings can occur, and that the black line on this particular plan outlines the limit of development for the plan. And it's my understanding, and I think Andrew's mentioned this before, and perhaps he could correct me, but I think the areas being saved is roughly 40 to 45% of the total area of Knollwood Court. So it's quite a substantial area being retained, and I think it's worthy noting that what we have done here is we've heard the community. I mean, again, keep in mind that there is an approved development in place, zoning. We've split zoned it. So we've zoned where that limit of development is. We've zoned it open space, and we've done that for a reason. We feel that's responsible, sort of next prudent step to take here. It will provide transparency to future lot owners and even to the surrounding community where tree savings is to occur through that P zoning and where they can develop their lots.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Councillor Davey.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Head. My first question is with respect to the pond specifically. I'm still a little bit unclear. Was that more a concern of you as a developer, or was it a concern of possible future encumbrances on the city, or a combination of the two?
It was a combination of the two, certainly. Ultimately, when we looked at the pond, we tried to see if we could deed it to the city or the GRC or the region if they would want to take over ownership of it, because we knew it's going to become a liability. There was initially a suggestion that maybe you modify the plan. And then we went back to the drawing board, we looked at it, we looked at the ideas, we looked at how we could capture the groundwater and pipe it out to, out to the cold drain. And that was how it essentially came to be, because once again, who's going to take ownership of that property once it's done?
Okay. As noted, the most significant density of trees is around where the Knollwood Court will be. In relation to the already approved plan from 1995, are more trees going to be saved then as a result from if we approve this plan versus the one from 1995?
Essentially, we're keeping to the 1995 tree savings plan that was submitted by Cumming, Colburn, and I think, sorry if I got the name wrong, back in 1995. Essentially, we've updated it with paying particular attention to the Knollwood area. Most of the additional trees that are located on the site are already located in the green space areas or the open space areas.
I think the question was with the preservation efforts, will more trees be saved?
Oh, most certainly. You know, at this point in time, we've already made upstanding efforts to...
Comparison to the initial, the original subdivision plan?
Oh, definitely, without a doubt.
Sorry.
With respect to Knollwood Court.
With respect to Knollwood Court.
Okay.
There's not many other trees on the site other than a Knollwood.
Okay. So this subdivision was approved in 1995. It sat for various reasons. If this does get approved, can you comment now on when you would expect construction to begin?
We're looking to start moving forward with obtaining full approval once we have draft approval.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Singh. As I look at this, the roads on the diagram here appear to be fairly wide. Do you, or maybe this is a staff question, will the parking lanes and bike lanes be installed as the neighborhood is built?
It's a question to staff or the delegation? If it's to the staff, if you can...
Yeah, I don't know who would know that answer. Are we...
Oh, sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, we don't have those details yet, but once the developer prepares the engineering drawings, our transportation staff will look at bike lanes and on-street parking and all those things those details that we would consider at that point in time. So I don't know if there's specific requirement for bike lanes on here or not at the moment. I could certainly check that out for you and send you an email if you like. If you'd like to know that information. But typically those details are looked at that point in time.
Yeah, it'd be great. I think it's good to be proactive with the assignment of bike lanes and implementation with the cycling master plan. Thank you.
Councillor Janetsky?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Do you have the staff report in front of you?
I have it with me.
Oh, okay.
It'll take
Well,
1
I'll ask the
second.
question then to staff on that. Just getting back to the slide that had on Knollwood Court, the proposal for the tree retention and the design for homes at the front, and that one there. Could you tell me, and I drove this back a while ago, and I just wanted to refresh my memory, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You indicated there's a stub that comes in and serves one lot just to the left there, right?
Yes, it's the only lot that fronts onto in the white section,
Right.
not inside the development. There is one house that is located on Knollwood Court. You can see
Okay.
the side lot.
And then the rest of the proposed court, is that totally wooded or is it just partially wooded?
It's actually partially wooded. There's a large clearing where the cul-de-sac ball is. We had actually looked at, done extensive research into trying to determine what we can do to save further trees. We looked at relocating the cul-de-sac ball and moving the whole road location and things like that. There's a lot of factors involved with this. Grading and drainage came to play when we relocated the ball, and we looked at the design standards and how it would work. Currently, the ball of the cul-de-sac is basically a open field-ish area. There's no real trees of any significance in there. That's why in 1995 it was actually designed for the idea of the cul-de-sac ball in there. And our investigations and looking at it through our engineering as well as our environmentalists is the cul-de-sac location, the ball, and the road are in the actual best place that we could possibly find.
Okay. And I appreciate that because that was already designed, like you said, 20 years ago.
Yes.
So basically, along the outer side of that particular area, basically being the backyards of those proposed houses, that's where all the trees are to be retained.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And there's a drip line that was alluded to by Councillor Fernandez that is standard part of nature of trees that are in the area. But we're going to be doing grading. Now, I don't know what the grading, I haven't seen any grading plans. I'm not too sure whether you're already at that stage. And I know servicing has to be done in such a way that the grades and the flows, the runoff from water, sanitary flows, all have to be designed to work. How much grade changes will be taking place there? Because if there is significant grade changes, it's going to affect the root system within the drip line, and then those trees will eventually die. Has that been taken into consideration?
That might be best answered by our engineer, if Mr. Rhoda would be so kind.
With regards to the grading in the Knollwood Court area, we were working very closely with the environmental consultant to find out where the trees, I'll say the most significant trees are, and how best we could start moving that line around to accommodate them as best we could. I know when we get down to each individual lot level, we'll have to make sure that the various drip lines of the trees that are the most desirable remain as they are. But as far as the grades, Knollwood Court is slightly lower than the existing grades there now. It's proposed to be slightly lower. And at the actually at that black line, we intend to match the grades right there. And depending on where the house is and how we can fit the grading around there, we might have to tweak it a little bit. Like there are some lots there that the house is definitely going to be shoved to one side. We'll be saving more trees on the other, depending on how we deal with the grading.
I can appreciate that. And that being a nice-looking cul-de-sac, those lots look large for single-family dwellings, probably nice big houses there. And, of course, the houses will have a setback from the rear yard line. But, again, once you, even though you put the servicing at the front of the lot and then on the streets, that's not too much of a concern. But still, you could do the grading change to fit the building design and the flow of the runoff from the houses, that the design itself and the foundation will be right at the drip line, if not into it, penetrating into it. And I'm just concerned that some of those trees just may not survive. And I'm aware of a couple other scenarios back over the years in the city. That type of scenario affected those trees. Not all of them, but it has an impact. So,
Allow Mr. Bateman, maybe he could add something to them.
So you've answered my question, but I'm not quite happy with the answer. That's all I have to say.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, condition 2.18, which is on page 1-46 of my report. And that
1-46.
1-46, Councillor. Oh, sorry, 2.18. So we've put a special condition in there that essentially requires not only a detailed vegetation plan for Knollwood Court, but also individual lot, tree preservation and tree management plan, and we will combine that with sort of the building location plans, Councillor. So we'll really get into that sort of detail at that point in time.
Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah, actually, Councillor Schneider brought up a very good point. In looking at the plan, one of the things that we continue to struggle with afterwards is the width of the roads and speeds. And I can see Otterbein being a wonderful throughway up until people get to the roundabout. Is there anywhere, and I apologize, Mr. Head, if this isn't one that you should be answering, and maybe if it is, then I'm going to stop asking you questions and move to staff when the time is right. Is it not possible to start right off the grading to make sure that the road has narrowings, especially when you come to any trail crossings, which I don't actually see on Ottawa? Well, yeah, there is. The Block Park, road narrowings there, a couple of in between where we can make sure that we don't end up with that speedway. We all know what happened on Robert Ferry, and I want to see us be very, very proactive in our designs, in our road designs and our transportation routes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I totally agree, Councillor. And again, our transportation staff, once the detailed engineering drawings can all take a look at those traffic calming measures.
Okay, yeah, there's a couple of other, like Quarry Park is another one. They'll shortcut if Otterbein is too busy. Okay, that's all the questions I have for you, Mr. Head. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Head, that's all the questions from the
Thank you,
committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
Staff.
I did have a couple more for staff.
Yes, and speaking to that, please, if the committee members can focus on the questions of the delegation. If your assumption is the question is appropriate to staff member, opportunity will be made after all the delegations have presented that we can form the questions to staff directly. It just allows for effective discussion with the delegation rather than multiple conversations. Next up is Pamela Smith. One more after this.
Thank you, Chair Singh.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address this committee this evening. I'm here to offer my qualified support of the 2016 revised proposal for the Sandra Springs development. I attended the public meeting in December 2014 to voice my concerns about the plan for developing the Knollwood Court woodland onto which my home backs. That earlier approved proposal entailed the extensive removal of mature trees with inadequate provision for tree saving. I was then, and remain now, concerned about the adverse effect that widespread urban deforestation has on the wildlife that currently depends on that forested areas. I worry about the inevitable negative impact of forest removal on air quality, local climate regulation, consumer energy costs, and stormwater control. In addition, I was surprised that development rights obtained 2 decades earlier were still in effect, despite new ownership and increased knowledge about the threats of climate change. Over the course of the 16 months since that public meeting, I have been involved in ongoing correspondence and discussions with the City of Kitchener's Planning Department regarding the development. I submitted for consideration 2 possible revisions to the 2014 plan. One recommended the dedication of the entire woodland as public parkland. A second option eliminated more than half of the residential lots on Knollwood Court. The developer rejected both options. To date, I've participated in 3 meetings at City Hall at the invitation of Brian Bateman, Senior Planner. Mr. Bateman also invited other people to inform our discussions, such as expert staff of the City of Kitchener and eventually a representative of the developer. When after many months and much discussion, the developer's October 2015 response to residents' concerns appeared to make no clear advancement on tree retention in the area, I contacted Brian Bateman again. It was obvious to me that residential development of the woodland would go ahead. I then made suggestions for specific tree preservation measures for the residential lots to prevent interference with roots and protect the remaining trees. The 2016 revised proposal, specifically the split zoning of Knollwood Court that includes a P2 protected area, reflects the spirit of my recommendations and is, in my opinion, a significant improvement on the earlier approved plan. It is a reasonable compromise. I believe this alternative would not exist were it not for Brian Bateman's efforts to find common ground, and so I acknowledge his contributions now. I'm especially pleased to see the amount of detail for enforcing the tree management policy of the city, including the requirement for a detailed vegetation plan during the process for subdivision registration. I also support the provision that the Director of Planning has to first approve the tree preservation plan for each site on Knollwood Court before the issuance of residential building permits. This is specified in Condition 2.18 of Appendix C, Conditions of Modified Draft Approval. I am encouraged that any alterations to these residential lots will be permanently limited by the P2 zoning conditions. I offer my qualified support of this revised tree saving proposal as a best available compromise, although my preference is still the preservation of the entire Knollwood Court woodland. I neither support nor oppose the other provisions to do with the subdivision because I have not reviewed them in detail. It is my sincere hope that this case informs your decision on this and future developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. There are questions of you. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. No question, Chair Singh. I just wanted to thank Pamela for her, and again, several meetings. She's really honed in on the wooded area here, and I can say it without reservation that if she wasn't involved, there would not be as many trees, I think, saved as there are now. I also want to really thank you for, I understand your passion for the woodland, but that probably makes it that much more difficult to have that reasonable approach in accepting the work that staff has done as well. So I had to thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. That's all the questions. Mr. Burton. Paul, as you know, you have 5 minutes to make a delegation.
Thank you, Chair Singh and Council. I'll be very brief. You've had a long day. I'm acting on behalf of Hallman Construction Limited, and I'm just here to support the subdivision, and in particular the matters that are in common with our client's lands. Our client owns the subdivision to the north, as well as some of the block consolidations to the south, and would like to thank Mr. Bateman as well as Mr. Head for working through the issues that we have in common, and look forward to the matter proceeding. Thank you.
There is one question. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Mr. Britton. Identifying that you said your client's lands are adjacent to this, or are they part of this subdivision plan?
They're adjacent to the subdivision, both to the north as well as to the south. So you can see, Councillor Fernandez, the block adjacent to the orange, which is the multiple block, and then the extension of Otterbein Road. One of the issues that was raised by the community was the desire to see Otterbein Road extended in the first instance for traffic reasons, and would commit this evening that we've acknowledged the community's desire and intend to work with the city in that regard to see that that occurs right in the first instance. And then to the south, again, there's some little consolidations which have to occur, which our client owns the adjacent blocks. And again, we work together with Mr. Bateman and the applicant to ensure that that happens.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And those are all the delegations, and we can now open up to questions of staff. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I actually had some concerns about traffic calming as well, as I was waiting for staff questions. So my understanding from your earlier answer is, I guess we don't have to get into detail now, but Otterbein, for example, that will be looked at in terms of pinch points, et cetera, at a later date?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay. Very good. I have a question about density. I looked at this and I looked at the old plan as well, and a lot of these lots do seem to be quite wide. I guess the question is, because I go by feet, and I think my understanding is a lot of these lots are as wide as 45 feet wide. Do you know what the density target is? Like how much more units could they have put in this property if the developer were inclined? Do you have an idea?
Well, in terms of density, Councillor, right now it's at 15 units per hectare. Okay, in our low-rise residential designation, of which these lands are part of, we, as in a policy, at least in a policy regime, support up to 25 units per hectare in our low-rise residential areas, sort of citywide. Okay, noting that some areas are higher and some areas are lower. So this is, at least from my perspective, is quite low. I mean, it's increased from 10 from the original, but that's really with the addition of the multiple units, which I think is a good thing for this plan. So, but it's still quite low.
Okay, so if the developer were inclined, he could have squeezed in many more units.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. The zoning would allow 9-meter lot widths, and he's chosen to retain the larger lots. We don't have many in this area, so I think that's a good thing.
Okay. How common is split zoning?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, it's been done before. I can't think of specific examples where, but it's not common.
Okay. And did the split zoning come as a result of the concern about the tree preservation?
Yes.
Okay. And last question, I remember reading the report somewhere, something that gave me some solace, I guess. If I read it correctly, when this subdivision is fully built out, granted that it will be replaced with some smaller trees than larger now, but when the subdivision is fully built out, there will be more trees on this parcel than there are now. Is that correct?
There'll be boulevard trees, which obviously don't exist right now. So I mean, it's obviously difficult to replace a woodlot per se, but certainly there will be more trees than there are right now. Correct.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would like to move this at the appropriate time.
That's great. Thank you. Councilor Fernandez?
Yeah, so in going through some of the conditions, one of the ones that stood out to me was the, on page 4-49, was the hydrological investigations and groundwater. What is, because there is a pond on the site right now, how is that fed? Is it spring fed? Is it runoff? What is it? How is it fed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's spring fed. Probably better question suited for our engineer, for Steve Rorta here to speak to. I mean, obviously they need to do some technical work to justify. Like, picture these lands. It's an old gravel pit, and where that pond was, it's excavated a little bit further down. There is a spring that feeds it. The pond no longer exists. It's been drained because the previous owner was worried about liability once the surrounding subdivision was occurring at that time. But yeah, there are certain technical requirements that have to be met, and additional investigations. We've made them conditions of approval. Our engineering staff is satisfied with the preliminary information they've given them to date to move forward with it.
Okay, I guess that would be one of my concerns, and if the chair allows the engineer to come down and answer that question, that would be fine.
That would be fine. If you want to hold, please come down. Do you want to just summarize your question again, Councilor Fernandez?
Yeah, so because this was an existing pond, and now I know that it was spring fed, and there is going to require a substantial amount of fill, I would expect, before you could start putting foundations in and such.
Correct.
Is that going to be a problem in that entire area? Because, I mean, water will find its way no matter what. Are these people going to have sub pumps that are going to be running 24/7 with backup generators?
No, what we've done, and again, our hydrogeologists have looked at the groundwater in the entire neighborhood, and using the word spring fed is a bit, I'm not sure if the understanding of what that means, but when they had the original ground level and then they dug it down, the groundwater is seeping out the side and coming down and entering the cold drain a little bit to the east. So what we're doing is, and we got to be very careful with our materials management and making sure that we put in a very porous sand material that's similar to the neighborhood to basically take that ground level, rebound it back to where it originally was. And then we've also done the modeling to make sure that all of the basements are going to be above that. And there is going to be some monitoring required over a number of years to make sure that our calculations are, in fact, reasonable and accurate. And we've left a little bit of a buffer to make sure that when that rebounds to its natural level, that our foundations are still above there. There's no, I think the city's requirement is 0.6 meters between the ground level and the underside of footing. And we've hit that almost everywhere. In fact, greater than that in a lot of cases.
So is that the only area where groundwater has been seeping? Is everything else going to be, is the groundwater significantly lower than where these houses are going to be excavated? And the runoff coming off of, because my understanding is Knollwood, the woodlot is higher than the rest of the land.
Correct. The surface runoff is separate, and that's going to make sure we adhere to the various drainage policies and grading requirements to direct it towards the road and the sewers and into our storm pond. The groundwater, and again, we've not only have we modeled the existing pond area, we've in fact modeled the entire development, and with working with the city and their engineers, that we've come up with a plan that does keep all of the basements above that level. And no matter where you are on the site, the intent is, and the design so far has been to be about 0.6 above that level.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just have a question, Mr. Chair, about generally speaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How many people are here in the audience on this particular plan? Can I ask that question? Can you stand up, just so I have a sense of...
Are you saying how many...
How many residents are here about this plan that have...
Raise your hand, please, if you want. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I guess my last question, Mr. Bateman, is I always have concerns about greenfield development. It's just my history. Everybody knows how I feel about them. I am really reluctant to sort of jump ahead and say, oh yeah, let's just go ahead and we've got a tree management plan and this is going to work and that's going to work. I just want to really have assurances that the tree management plan, the vegetation plan, everything is going to be set at a much higher standard than we have had in the past. How can you guarantee that?
Well, I don't know if I can give an ironclad guarantee, Councillor, but I think one thing that we've achieved here is we've taken that next sort of critical step and we have zoned those open space areas. So that's one level of assurance right there. It's clear, it's transparent for everyone. I mean, regardless of whether we would zone this or not, we always have our tree management plans in place. But I mean, they're with the city, and people don't always have access to those. So by zoning those areas, like I said, it's very clear and transparent. And there's going to be other measures that put in place. Like I said, we've got the condition that requires the owner of each of those lots on Oldwood to prepare plans that have to work in conjunction with the detailed vegetation plans and prepare tree savings and enhancement plans on a lot by lot basis. That's above and beyond what we normally would require. Our environmental planning staff is directly involved in that process. The developer's consultant, their engineer, will have an environmental consultant in place helping to inform all the engineering drawings. So there's a lot of review and scrutiny that will take place, not only with this development, but for development throughout the city in general.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your responses, everyone.
Councillor March?
Thank you. Just a question regarding the school zones that the people living in this area will be in. Has that all been accounted for in terms of capacity in the local schools?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as part of our review process, the school boards are contacted, and yes, these numbers have been factored into their school planning. Yes.
Okay. My apologies if I missed that in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the questions of staff. The item has been moved by Councillor Davey. I'll go to Councillor Davey if you want to make your comments.
Sure, I'll be brief. I think it's important to acknowledge, first I'd like to acknowledge the residents of the area for providing their feedback. I think that feedback has really resulted in, no one's ever going to be completely happy with how these things turn out, but I think the resident feedback has really resulted in a much better subdivision than what was originally proposed. And I want to thank Ms. Smith for coming in it's so often we hear from people that have concerns and they speak ill of something. It's not every day that we have someone come in and acknowledge the work of staff. On that point too, I want to thank our staff for, this is a very large file. This is one of the very last buildable areas in the ward that I represent, and I'm happy to see that it has gone as smoothly as it could have gone. So thank you for that. So with that, I'm very happy to move it, Mr. Chair.
Great. Councillor Janetsky.
Yes, this is a long plan in terms of going through the approval process, and it's come to a point where it's been modified to reflect some changes and lot additions and a few other resolutions of like the gravel pit or the old swimming hole, which actually was a swimming hole after the gravel pit extraction happened. There used to be, I didn't go there, but I heard of some neighborhood kids go there and swim there during the summer. But of course it becomes a liability issue, and with it being removed, I think that's probably the best way of going it. This is an excellent plan, the continuation of the subdivision in the Grand River North area. The lot sizes that the developer has in the initial plan and continued on into here is excellent to hear that he has maintained that, and that will complement the abutting subdivision has been there for many, many years that the residents have. They've been there when some of their lands were farmlands, and there was woodlots there, and when they moved in over the last 20 years, they saw what has happened, and now the budding lands where they are now being developed, and they should be satisfied with what has taken place. Knollwood Court, I did have some concerns there. It's a typical intrusion of a cul-de-sac into a wooded area. Of course, the staff have put in some policies with tree saving, and they're the best policies you can provide, and I think they're good. However, if you read them closely enough, if there's trees that are affected and died for whatever reason, this developer has to replace it, and that's fine. But that's the thing that you want to avoid. You want to maintain the trees that are there and not replace them with a new sapling that would be required to fulfill that requirement. So I think if you do it closely enough and monitor it, you can still design the houses and lots and the foundation that you hopefully don't lose any houses, and that's the objective of the whole process. So it's a great plan, great work by staff, very detailed because there's tons of information and tons of reading and tons of conditions. It's an excellent report, well done by staff, and I'm going to be supporting it.
Thank you, and Councillor Narski, you're right. It is a great plan, and tremendous great effort has been taken by our staff. Councillor Fernandez, you asked a question of staff and asking for assurances that the right measures have been taken for tree preservation. Ultimately, we have to have confidence in our staff that they have gone through the processes and looked at best practices working with the applicant to ensure that that will be the case. And I have that confidence, and seeing that this subdivision will ultimately have probably more trees than it currently has after it's completed is a good sign towards that. And this the subdivision meets our ongoing effort and goal to build communities and neighborhoods that are complete neighborhoods. With that, I will support the recommendation, and there are no other comments. So I will ask the vote. Recorded vote has been called. Oh, I gotta go over there. Okay. Yes, I've already said I'm supporting, so. Is the vote now? I already voted, okay. All right, all those in favor, that's unanimous. So the item has been approved. So this will be referred to 2 weeks from now to be ratified by council, but has been approved by the committee. Thank you for those that attended and offered their opinions as delegations as well. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.